So, Josh, what's the latest on the situation that you're covering?
Well, the latest, Chris, is that a little more than 24 members of the NTSB, a GO team, are en route, many of them already on the ground at LaGuardia as they begin what will be a laborious process of collecting as much evidence as they can and trying to get to the bottom of all the factors that led to this disaster last night at LaGuardia Airport. It's not a cut and dry thing. It never is. There are always many, many things that have to go wrong in order to create the circumstance for something like this to happen. Last night, shortly before midnight, there was an Air Canada flight, flight 8646 from Montreal, that was on short final to runway 4 at LaGuardia. It was about to, or it might even have just touched down at the very moment that an airport fire truck on the way to assist a different flight that was having an emergency requested that air traffic control clear it to cross that very runway. It got that clearance. And moments later, the controller realized that there was a collision course in play and tried to stop that fire engine, but it was too late.
Thank you so much for that, Josh. Stephen, we know the FAA is joining the NTSB to look into this. What are they doing right now to figure out what happened?
So they're gathering all the evidence, and following what Josh said, I am absolutely certain. I was the director of accident investigation for the FAA. The NTSB owns the probable cause. That is their function, and they are in charge of the investigation. The FAA has to implement any regulatory changes and things like that could come afterward. But this accident will be solved to a certainty because all the evidence is right there in front of you. So you've got voice and data recorders on the aircraft. You've got a fair amount of video. All the air traffic control communications are recorded. So what happened will be reassembled, and that's what they're doing right now. Reassembled to an absolute certainty. And I would just this kind of confirms what most of us in this field think, that the remaining highest area of risk for an aircraft, an airliner, is the airport environment for a few reasons. The airplanes are all in close proximity. There are a lot of vehicles, like in this case, that aren't aircraft. They have some training, but not the same as the airliners. And the traffic flow is not metered precisely as it is when the airplanes are in flight.
So let me go back to you, Josh, because Stephen just brought up all the different pieces of evidence. My understanding is that there is dispatch audio. Is that right?
Yeah, Chris, there's a particularly dramatic, obviously, it was a very dramatic night. And so we're going to play for you a few clips of the air traffic control audio of what the controller experienced and what he was trying to do to stop this crash, and then his reaction after the fact, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Frontier 4195, stop there, please. Stop. Stop, truck 1, stop. 3, go around, only heading 2000. Jet 646. Jet 646, the vehicles are responding to you now. Frontier 4195, I got the word that we're going to be closed for a little while. If you want prepared to return to the ramp, let me know.
Yeah, we got stuff in progress for that, man. That wasn't good to watch.
Yeah, I know, I was here. I tried to reach out to my stuff, and we were dealing with an emergency earlier, and I messed up.
No, man, you did the best you could.
That's sort of a heartbreaking exchange at the end there. And I think it's important, Chris, to point out a few things about workload and air traffic controllers and pilots, for that matter. It's something the NTSB has spoken about a lot, where their investigation isn't into the actions of any one person. It's why was there a situation that had been created to allow that to happen? They talk a lot about workload. So what was predating all this is an emergency, as I said earlier, involving a different airplane on a whole different side of the airport, that they were trying to get help to that airplane. That's why the fire engine had been dispatched in the first place. So you have so many things going on at once, while at the same time you've got planes moving in and out of the airport. It's a very high stakes thing. They say it's a high stress environment. One of the things the NTSB is going to be looking at is what they refer to as human factors. What are the ways that things could be deconflicted, de-stressed, to prevent decisions or to make decision-making easier and more methodical? This is obviously a very experienced air traffic controller in a very, very busy part of the airspace. How did this happen? That's a harder question almost than what happened, Chris.
Yeah, and I think, Stephen, to the point that it's never just one single thing, right? That these are complicated investigations. If we go back to the DCA crash, where obviously it wasn't this, it was a midair collision between a helicopter and a plane, and everybody aboard was killed. But it was a pretty brutal early assessment when they put out the first look about how many problems there are with staffing, how many problems there are with exhaustion. What do you think, can there be a takeaway that actually changes things if we have accidents like this that kill people?
So I would say, if I can make one sort of generic recommendation, it's that, the greater extent to which you get the human being out of the loop. People make mistakes. So if this sort of separation can be fully automated, the technology is substantially in place already to do that. But really, and as Josh said, and as the accidents are a chain of events, but you have to break something in the chain. And again, I would, looking forward, we've had these two accidents, the one in DC that we talked about, and this one, where there are just, they're going to disclose without prejudging it, human shortcomings. And so I think that further reliance on automation is probably where I would hold out hope for substantial improvement in the future.
So, Will, I noted the ripple effects at other airports. Obviously, if your plane was supposed to arrive wherever elsewhere in the country but never left from LaGuardia, that's a problem. What is the situation across the country today?
Well, Chris, even if the chaos from this crash at LaGuardia weren't happening, I mean, passengers across the country would still be facing a ton of travel headaches at airports because of how critically understaffed TSA is right now. Because of this partial government shutdown, agents are missing paychecks. Some of them are calling out from work. And so it's led to crazy long security lines. And we've all seen the videos of lines going out the door at some airports. You mentioned in your opening, Chris, folks in Atlanta are telling people to show up to the airport there 4 hours in advance of their flight. Similar messaging at airports in New Orleans and around the country. And so, therefore, President Trump is deploying ICE agents to some of these airports, 14 airports across the country, including here at Newark, to try to assist TSA. But it's causing some concern and ambivalence from passengers. Let's take a listen to a couple folks we spoke to here.
I think it's very, very, I don't know what to say. What should I say? I think it's scary. Why should I be there? Are they helping?
You saw people bracing themselves, like, what the hell's going on here? And there were a lot of people who were taking pictures and sort of watching them. They were just milling around. They weren't even doing anything. I don't know, just sort of chatting. I don't know what their function was.
And to that last woman's point, Chris, we're still trying to figure out the details of what exactly these agents are doing. Now, we can't see the security area. We imagine that there are some ICE agents there supporting the work of TSA. We've seen some just kind of walking around the terminal here in the check-in area and a baggage claim. We're still getting some details about that as the day goes on, Chris.
Thank you for that, Bill Kristol. I have so many questions for you, but let me start with what the president had to say this morning about sending ICE agents into airports. And he made a distinction about agents wearing masks, ICE agents going into airports wearing masks. Here's what he said.
I'm a big believer that they should be able to wear masks when they go and hunt down, murderers, criminals, and others. But for purposes of the airport, I've requested that they take off the mask. I don't like it for the airport, and I believe they are willing to do that.
And even beyond that, there's a lot of folks, Bill, raising questions about whether this training that they get to be ICE agents is applicable to being a TSA agent. I don't know whether they wear masks or not. Is this going to make things better necessarily?
I mean, no one I know who knows a little bit about how these organizations work think it's going to make things appreciably better. They're just not trained to do this. So maybe they can do some marginal things at some airports, watch some doors or something, relieve one or two other TSA guys to go man the more stuff that they're trained to do. But no, it's not going to help. The rationale for the masks is puzzling, right? Isn't the rationale for the mask was they're at such risk, these these ICE people, being doxxed. Someone will take a photo of them and then they'll be on the internet. Well, plenty of people at airports, the last I looked, plenty of people have their phones with them and are taking photos of a lot of things. And so what's the rationale for them being masked when they stop Renee Good on the streets of Minneapolis and not at an airport? I think it really undercuts the rationale, which was never a good one, for being masked. But also for Trump, you know, it came out this morning that Trump is the one who is blocking a deal between John Thune and Chuck Schumer, Senate Republicans and Democrats, to go ahead with funding TSA, funding all of DHS except for ICE. And then Thune is going to put the ICE funding in the reconciliation bill, which they can pass with 50 votes with a partisan vote. So the Democrats don't have to vote for it. They don't want to vote for ICE as it's currently configured. I'm sympathetic to that. But the Republicans will pass it. But meanwhile, they'll get the rest of DHS, which includes a TSA, funded. And Trump blocked that. It seems to me like Thune's office probably leaked that story, honestly. How else would we know about these private conversations between Thune and the White House? Thune wants to make clear this isn't his doing. So Democrats need to just say at the top of their lungs, we want to fund TSA. Trump is blocking. Trump is pretending to solve the problem by sending ICE agents there, and he's blocking funding the TSA.